To create a test file in our app, we'll use the touch command. Usually, in a more complex project, it's good practice to place our source code and our test files in separate folders. But since this is a fairly small project with only one source code file, we're going to leave the pytests.py file in the same directory and write all our tests in it. So let's open our tests.py file and start writing our tests. First, we need to import our script so that we can use the objects and functions created there. So I import the reminders app, and from the reminder, we import tasks. Then we read our first test functions to test the find task function. The convention is to name the test function by adding test in front of the function name. Let's omit the underscore at the beginning, so it is test find task. Now we need a dummy task list to test with. So we define the task list to be a list of task items, with two items to start with, one with the name parent and the other by bread. Then we use the assert statement, which should only be used in testing, to compare the function's result against the expected results. So I type assert, the name of the function I want to test at .findTask, and I give by bread as the search parameter, and task list as the list to look into. The result should be the task with the name by bread. Great, a test is written, so let's run it with pytests. We first save the file and go back to the terminal. And then we use pytest command to run the test. As you can see, we ran one test and it passed, as shown by the green dot. But what does it look like if it fails? Let's try it out by editing our test.py file. I'm going to change the assert statement slightly to make it fail. I changed the task name to by milk. Save and quit and run it again. As you can see, instead of the green dot, we now have a red F showing it failed. There's also a message showing why it failed. In our case, it says that there's a difference in the name attribute. To see the detailed comparison, we can run the test again with the -VV option. Now you can see the comparison side by side, which is really handy, especially when you are dealing with more complex objects with nested dictionary or objects with multiple attributes. Now let's go back to fix the test from the byte milk back to byte bread. And let's also write an ups test where if nothing is found in the list, none will be returned. So I copy the first test and modify it by changing the assert statement to is none instead of comparing it to a test like before. Okay, so I save and quit. And run the test again to make sure all tests passed. As you can see, we have two green dots instead of just one. That is because we now have two tests. This is very nice, but what if I want to write more tests against the find task function? I could repeat the copy and paste process several times, but it can become very messy, especially if we mix them up with other tests. In the next video, we will use a trick called parameterize to create multiple tests for the same function with different parameters in a neat way. To be able to parameterize our tests, we first need to add the parameterize feature to our code. So let's open it and import pytests with this feature. So I type import pytests, and then we add the decorator to the existing test function. So let's put it on the first one. Now, we need to put the parameters in. If we look closely at the two tests, they both meet two parameters, an input to be tested and an expected result. Let's name these parameters test, input, and expected, and add them in the decorator. Then we define a function called test find task that receives that test, input, and the expected values. And then we change the function accordingly by using the assert to compare the result of the function against the expected values. But we're still missing something. The decorator needs two inputs. The first one is the string, where we define the parameters separated with commas. In our case, that's test input, comma, expected. The second input is a list of parameter values, which is tuples holding all the test case values. Our first test case is buy bread, along with the task object that reminds us to buy bread. So let's put it in our list by adding a list with the tuple buy bread and the task. Now, let's add the second test case for buy banana and expect to have a none object in return. So we add another tuple with buy banana and none for the expected value. Finally, we can delete the second test functions since we're covered by the new parameterized tests. Let's save and quit and run the test again. We can see that we still have 2 green dots indicating 2 tests have passed, even though we have only wrote one test function in our file. It is because when we run our tests, the parameterized decorator magically changed a test function into 2 test functions that are exactly the same, except the parameters, since each test case is actually a separate test in pytests. And so, if one set of parameters fail, it shows each fail independently. Let's see if that's true. Let's go back to the file and make some changes. Let's change the second test case slightly by changing the none to a task name buy banana. And run it again. And here we go. We have one pass and one fail. This is expected because we don't have buy banana in our list. So let's go back and fix our file by placing the none back. Now, here's a little challenge for you before we go on to the next video. Can you try to add one more test to the parameterized test? Let's add a test to see if the function can find the pay rent task in the list. You may want to check if the capitalization matters in our find task function. So let's make the input all caps. Pause the video and try it on your own before seeing the result. Okay, did you get it? This is how I did it. I add another tuple to the list with pay rent and it have the name pay rent as the expected value. Once again, we save and quit and run our tests. As we see, all 3 tests passed. Now, you know how to create parameterized test. Make good use of it in the future and let's keep going and write some more tests in the next videos.